It takes a village to become somebody. It takes a village to be successful. It takes a village to thrive.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Are you ready? Let's go do this. I'm very excited to talk about your new book, Connections, because community is something that we all experience, and it's all different for everybody. But even before we talk about your book, I want people to know who they're listening to.
I'm Patricia Bathory. I'm an entrepreneur and psychotherapist. That's usually what I introduce myself as. An entrepreneur. I have an import-export business out of Brazil, and I've been a psychotherapist for the last eight to 10 years. I need to do the math here, but yeah, 8 to 10 years. I see clients. I focus on leaders because of my entrepreneurial background, and that's what I do, and I love it. Yeah. The top three. So, well, I think the easiest one to bring out of this bunch is psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist is a medical doctor. So they're MD. It is a doctor. It's the one that prescribes. If you need any prescriptions, that's who you go to. A psychologist and a psychotherapist, they're very similar. They have the exact same education. And I'm talking about Canada here. I don't know how it works in the States, but in Canada, psychologists and psychotherapists, they both have the same education, which is a master's in counseling psychology, and they are just regulated by different bodies. So that's really the difference between, and basically both psychologists and psychotherapists, they have many different approaches they can work from. So the approaches are also the same between these two, but between the two categories is mostly the governing body that differs. So not really, it's not an exciting difference. Yeah. 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 It's actually my first career. I have an MBA. I moved back to Brazil. So I'm originally from Brazil, lived in Canada, was educated in Canada, met my husband who was my boyfriend at the time, and then after I finished my MBA, well, let's move to Brazil and see what that's like. And one of the things I found hard there was to find a job as a young executive. So I couldn't really find something that was interesting, that paid well. So I wasn't thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, but he comes from an entrepreneurial family and he was always supporting me and, telling me and I should do this and that and that. So one day, finally, I listened to him and I'm like, fine, I will do this. And I opened this import export company. I buy food products from Brazil and export them to private labels in the US. I did that for many years and was really happy. It's a successful business. I'm quite happy with it. Love my clients, love every day. But at one point or another, there was a little bit of something missing. I think that was the purpose piece. I loved the job. I loved what I did, the people I interacted with, but I never really felt like I made a difference, right? Because ultimately, if I stopped exporting, well, people would just buy a different brand of juice. People would just buy a different product. It wasn't really going to make a dent in the market. So then I decided to then maybe switch careers. I went back to school, got a master's in psychology. I actually got psychoanalytical training in Brazil for 3 years before that, and decided to, well, maybe I could make an impact in somebody's life. And this also has to do with me having gone to therapy a little bit before that and having had the therapist have such a huge impact in my life that I'm like, well, I wonder if I could do that for somebody else. I felt, it was so life-changing that I wanted a little bit of that for me to be able to change somebody or to be able to help somebody. So that's what I did. Went back to school, started working as a psychotherapist, and my purpose piece is really fulfilled. I love what I do. It is full of meaning. It is full of, um, I love every day talking to people, helping them get different perspectives and instill hope in situations that don't seem to have any. So, and I love it.
Oh, that's cool. So it sounds like the something missing piece was your purpose, a deeper sense of purpose. And
Absolutely.
that's what prompted you to go back to school and earn your degrees and work with people now. That's very cool. So where does the book fall into your journey then?
So the book, I think it's a little bit of a consequence of seeing clients. So not everybody has access to therapy. Not everybody has extended benefit plans, or if you're not paying out of pocket. So it's something still a little bit more exclusive, I find. And one thing that I found seeing clients was that there was a common denominator to a lot of the suffering, and it ended up being relationships. You know, we perform well at work, we perform well at all these different realms that we do, but if we have an issue with our partner or our children or the people we work with or our family of origin, those things are so having those issues, they're so debilitating that they impact everything else that you do. And speaking to my clients, I realized that there are some things we are, there are strategies you can do to get along better. If you can be intentional about your relationships and focus on them and adjust some of these behaviors that we tend to do, then they improve so much. And then the whole quality of your life improves. So these little tweaks in your relationships, they reverberate, they have a ripple effect that affects everything else. So finding this out through seeing clients, I wondered if I could amplify that message even more. Right. So I'm like, well, if I wrote a book, then not only people that have access to therapy would know that, then I can just get this to people who don't have access to therapy or who just want to do it at their own time or don't want to or not ready for, or still maybe have some stigma against, read that book and amplify this message. So that was the motivation behind it. And I wrote the book, and the motivation became really a journey, and it became another piece of that purpose, because what I decided too was, well, I'm going to publish the book and I'll double down on the motivation. I'll double down on my belief that connection is the most important thing. So what I'm doing is all the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds from the book sales are donated to Big Brothers Big Sisters, which is an initiative that also focuses on relationships, on connecting littles and bigs that can be mentored to these littles. And so that these littles, there's a lot of research showing how these littles benefit from this relationship, the importance of relationships. So it has everything to do with a book. And I'm like, okay, we're all good. It's all around a wheel of good here.
Yeah, I love that how books can integrate and intertwine with other areas of your life, and then you can use them and tie them back in. Why big brothers and big sisters? You mentioned that it was, it's the big and the little part. Is there anything else that touches you, like why you chose them?
Yeah, there's nothing personal in the sense of, well, I was a little, I was a big. There's nothing of that kind. On the other hand, I should be a big. I should be a big to many kids because I come from, like if I look at my biography, I'm very privileged. Had great parents, have great siblings, had a great life, went to good schools, no trauma in my past. So. Um, I can't say that, there was something, but I did benefit from a lot of good relationships in my life. So again, having my parents as great mentors, my mother was very impactful in focusing and making me be the best I could be and believe in all this potential that I had great friends, all these people that really mentored or impacted or allowed for me to get to where I got. So I believe in the idea of having mentors that help you go further. And Big Brothers Big Sisters is nothing more than that, except in a not in a family way, right? You get mentors from different areas of society, and then helping these kids that maybe wouldn't have had a mentor otherwise.
Right, or didn't have the upbringing or parents, and
Absolutely.
kind of the opposite from where you came from. So I think
Yeah.
that's a great I think it's a beautiful connection and great idea to take what to have this book that you've created and then not only benefit people who read it and then it affects them. So I heard you mention about relationships and small steps. So let's go there. What are some small steps in relationships that you see people can make and that can start to have a bigger impact on them if they were to, like recognize these steps?
I love, first of all, like I love the idea of small steps, right? For some reason, we think everything needs to be, we think solutions come from these big decisions we make or these big steps that we take. But actually, no, in reality, it is the sum of little shifts that leads us to success, that leads us to good relationships. And when you ask, what are some of these small steps? The book is all about these tiny little incremental changes or these tiny little behavior adjustments that we can make that improve then our relationships by a bunch. So some of these things, I talk about listening a lot in the book. Listening is your superpower. If you can just, that's where communication starts. That's where relationship starts, by being able to truly understand what it is that the other person's saying, making no assumptions, not interrupting, not assuming that they're going to say, oh, I know already what you're going to say. Well, no, you don't. Because if you're assuming, then you haven't heard me. So something, listening is, I'd say, the number one thing. The number two, probably as close as number one, probably these two will be like a tie for one, is having a curious posture. So a curiosity, throwing that into everything you do. So even when somebody says something you disagree with, or you see actions that you disagree with, being curious and suspending judgment and trying to understand what about that person's story or background makes them think the world works that way, or makes them think that is acceptable, or makes them believe these are this is what the world is like, right? The whole worldview comes from a consequence of what your whole history is like. So these are the fundamental little changes. There's a lot others. I divide them in, how do you evaluate the relationships? What are relationships worth keeping? What ones are the ones worth investing in? So there's a lot of these little treasures in the book.
I love it. So, listening and being curious. You mentioned hearing. Do you differentiate between listening to somebody and hearing someone? Because I think in the English language, you could hear listen and hearing and think they mean the same thing, but I suspect they're not.
They're not. I think you can, listening and hearing. I don't know which one is the stronger word, because that subtlety in the language might go by me. But you can listen, but not understand. So I usually go, listen to learn, because you can sit there quiet. And there's a big difference between listening and waiting for your turn to talk, right? When I'm here sitting silent and you're talking, but I'm already thinking, what am I going to answer next? I'm not really paying attention. I don't really understand you. I'm not really hearing you. To really hear what somebody has to say involves suspending judgment, involves opening a space in your mind that opens up the possibility of whatever it is that you're saying being right, even though it might be absolutely different from what I think. Right? Having that ability of going, okay, you're saying something I totally disagree with, but say more about that. Explain to me a rationale, so that, walk me a mile in these shoes, so maybe I can see the world from your perspective. That is gold. That is when you truly are listening to somebody, right? Because when you listen and you hear and you learn and you understand, it doesn't mean you're agreeing. And I think that is the fear a lot of people have. Well, no, if I really understand, then it means I agree. No, it just means you understand. It just means you can now respect why they have that opinion. So listening, like you can do a whole book on this listening thing, because it's so important. It's so crucial to then us having good relationships, to connecting across differences, connecting across diversity, across generations. It really is a superpower.
Wow. So it sounds like somebody kind of like speak back to the person and say to them, yeah, I hear you. I know, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I think you said. And then follow up from there with what they, what they want. That would be that would kind of demonstrate to the person that they actually heard them, that they were listening.
Yeah. That's your gold standard right there. Or asking, right? Because sometimes, when you say something, and if it's what usually happens is when you're talking about something that is a little bit aligned with how I think, we tend to understand easier and understand better. But if you start talking about something that either I don't know about, or if it's something I don't agree with, that's when that listening has to be more intentional, right? And that's when that you go, okay, are you saying this then? Do I, make sure you get that clarity, whether you're going to paraphrase or just ask or confirm, because we can't assume, because our assumptions are always going to come from our filters and our point of view. And that's where the mistakes are made.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I heard you mention about curiosity and being curious. Like if somebody's not curious, or what would stand in somebody's way to being curious?
Being certain. I think that is, we're
That's
so,
a good
and
answer.
what gets in the way, being certain. I know what I know. That's how I think. I know my values. I know what I stand for.
Mm,
And it's like, well, what you do, but you don't know what you don't know. So I think that's the danger of being so certain. That's the danger of all this certainty. And that is the reason we're so polarized these days, because we're not even interested. We know what we know. We stand our ground. I know what I'm for. And, that's what shuts down the whole curiosity, all this certainty, all this self righteousness. And there's nothing wrong with having firm values. There's nothing wrong with, I know I know what I know, what I stand for, my values, whether it's your religion or whatever it is that you have, firmly about. That does not mean you can't, again, going back to that listening, learning, understanding. If you do all that, does not mean you're all of a sudden, okay, now all of a sudden, just because I understand this other point of view does not mean you stop having yours. It just means you understand. It just enriches what you believe, enriches what you see, and it enriches you as a human being.
yeah, I can see that. I think sometimes we forget that the other person we're talking to, there's a depth to them, and that they understand things as, they see the world through their eyes. We see the world through our eyes. And we often forget there's a common ground we can come to, and a middle ground. I don't 100% have to agree with everybody all the time, but it's okay to come together and have constructive conversation. From your book, I pulled a quote off of there. It said, quote, I decided to write this book because relationship issues cause a great deal of suffering, lower our productivity, and undermine even the best laid plans. What was the driver for you behind that quote? I found it just so intriguing.
That it's how sometimes you know exactly what you were thinking when you wrote something. That line, I remember it so well. I have a friend who runs a paint company, and he's an engineer, and he's very, he everything is very laid out properly and procedures. His company runs on ISO 9000. It's impeccable. And we're talking one day, and he knows I love psychology and I'm a psychotherapist. He knows all that. And we're talking, and he says, it is incredible how human beings are so, how relationships affect them so much. He goes, you can have these best laid out plans. So he has the great equipment, state of the art equipment in his company, the best procedures. What happens if this machine doesn't work? He has all these processes laid out. And he goes, it doesn't matter. If John over there finds out his child was lying to him, or finds out his child was doing drugs, or if his wife told him she's going to leave him, there is no production that day. Like, quality is going to suffer. Everything suffers, because we really are relational creatures. So when our relationships suffer, our production suffers. Everything we do is affected by that. Right. So that's why it's so important to look at your relationships, evaluate them, see which ones are moving you forward, which ones are keeping you back, which ones are supportive, and then invest in the ones that make sense. Maybe push aside the ones that are really not making sense anymore, or the ones that are weighing you down. And that's what it is. All my clients, they come into therapy. That's the biggest thing we talk about: relationships.
Wow. How can somebody differentiate between, like, how can they tell whether or not to stay in a relationship, whether that's worth it for them or not? Like, where's the
That
signs?
that's a podcast just in itself.
Well, we'll
I
stick with small. Well, let's go small steps, and we'll just
small
say,
steps,
yeah,
small
we'll just
steps.
do
I
small
agree.
steps, general.
Small steps, small steps. I so it really has to do with this evaluation, right? How long have you been in this relationship? You need to have an objective view of what's going on. I want to recommend, in this case, absolutely a therapist. I do believe that in therapy is where you have the opportunity, where you give yourself the gift of reflection. I love therapy defined as the gift of reflection, because you can sit there. The therapist comes with these very objective questions. It helps you question, it challenges you on your thinking. And that's usually how you can start be more criterious and be more objective about, is this a good relationship for me to be in? Right. And I'll tell you this, that like clients will come in, whether we'll talk about couples counseling here. You come in as a couple. I don't know if 6 months from now that couple is going to make it or break it. I can't tell, because it is about, how do these conversations evolve? What is in the past? How do we evaluate what you have? So there's a balance sheet going on here that, okay, we have a family together. We've built so much together. We have these great memories together, these children, these, our work, we grew with each other. And then there's also the other side of the balance sheet, which is all the pain, all the resentment, all, everything that has been going on. And then the attitude of the present. How do people relate to each other in the present? What's that posture like? So then we evaluate all of these three and evaluate the person's commitment moving forward. Are you in for adjusting in building a second chapter? Or, you know what, I'm checked out. This was great, but really I'm ready for something else. So the small steps, I think, are evaluating, looking at it a little bit more critically. It's not a simple, you don't make me feel that way, or you did me wrong. And
Yeah,
it's
it's not
almost,
superficial. In other words, it's not
absolutely not. No,
superficial. And then it's almost helpful to have a third party come in and be objective too, because when you're in that situation, the way you perceive something can be different than how the other person in the relationship perceives it. And then having a third person in there can kind of look through and weed out and say, okay, well, this is what I see.
yeah,
And they're non-emotional about
they're
it. I
not
think
emotional.
do you find, like, when people start putting emotion in, that's when objectivity becomes less objective, when
Absolutely
emotions
so.
are there. Yeah.
Absolutely so. And I'll tell you this, when clients come in, it's amazing how much clarity I have to help them. So a couple will come in, or somebody will come in and talk about their relationship with their parents. And sometimes people were done. So I had a client, I'll tell you the story. This is very interesting. A story of a friendship, a 20-year-old friendship. These friends, and the friend did the friend wrong. So my client had a relationship for 20 years with this lady. They were friends. They grew up together, all this stuff. And then she did something that really upset her. Really upset her. Who does this? This is not my friend. She's now showing her true colors. I remember that was the sentence I grabbed with my two hands, and I'm like, okay, hang on a second. You've been friends for 20 years. And now you tell me now she's showing you her true colors. Does that mean for the last 19 years she was not real? Tell me about the time when you lost your job and she helped you, out of despair, and she helped you find a new job, and she did all that. Was she being fake then? Right. So I have this clarity because I'm not involved in the hurt that she was in the moment of being done wrong. So I think a therapist has that distance that allows them to look at it a little bit more objectively. And I'll go a step further. you can only be objective if it's not about you. So therapists have therapists, because as clear and objective that as I can be to my clients, I don't have that objectivity with my own life, with my own conundrums, right? In my own relationship with my partner, with my children, with my parents. So for those relationships, all that clarity is gone because I am so in it, emotionally connected with all this baggage. So, this is the human condition is work, the minute emotions get involved, the minute our subjectivity gets in, the objectivity is out the window.
That's amazing. The one thing you said, that even the therapist has a therapist. Sometimes you think therapists is like, oh, they can just take care of themselves, and they can't. And I have a coach, and we talk all the time about, even the coach needs a coach. You have to have somebody else objective, to look at you from a different standpoint and to take the emotion out of it. Do you think there's times where people can, even though they're in the midst of something, become objective themselves when they're in the middle of something? And suppose, a therapist isn't around, suppose the coach isn't around, or there's some support network that's not there. Is objectivity able to be found?
Oh, that is a hard question because I don't want to say hard yes or a hard no. But there is something that I do believe, that is, a good therapist has a therapist, because they can only take their clients to the level or to the depths that they have gone themselves. So there's something about that paradigm that I really believe in. Now, does that mean you can't be objective? I think if you do the work, if you've been in therapy for a while, and I just like, even with my clients, I think there's two types of therapy. When you come in, we're doing therapy, okay, we have a dumpster fire, there's a problem we're solving, how do we solve this situation? So that's the first kind of therapy. It's solving problems. And then usually when we solve that problem, the clients will usually take two paths. I'm done. Thank you. See you later. And then they leave, or they see value in staying. And this second type of therapy I call analysis. So when you come in to solve your problem, you get the tools, you solve the problem, and you leave. When you go into analysis, that's when you develop the skill of self-analyzing, of critically being able to look at yourself, of detaching yourself from the situation and observing it, and having a session in your head between you and yourself, right? Because then you do that often enough, then of course, objectivity is something you can develop, and definitely you get better at it for sure. So I find that people who are in analysis, people that have gone to therapy for many years, there's a different way that they think. It's analytical. You can be self-critical. You can look at it and go, okay, that was me being triggered. That is me reacting, not responding. You already have the lingo. You already have the tools. Does that mean that's going to work 100%? So that's why I couldn't answer your question yes or no, because yes, you do get infinitely better, but will you get stuck? At one point or another, you get stuck. I've been with the same therapist for over 10 years. I went to therapy nonstop for probably 2-3 years, 2.5 years. And then from then to now, so the last 7 years, 6-7 years, I go in when I get stuck. So I'll go in, I'll stay another 3-4 months, and then I'm out. And then I'm out for 6-7 months, or I'm out for a year, and then I'm back again for 6
It's like
months.
maintenance.
It's maintenance,
It's
because
maintenance,
sometimes
yeah.
you will get stuck on something, right? Things
Yeah.
change. Your kids, my oldest is finishing university. So she's gonna, I'm gonna be beginning to be an empty nester. So there's one child leaving. And, what do you do with that? It's like,
Yeah, that's another stage of life. I have 3 of them on the other side of that. So I have 3 of them that have left. And, I always said the purpose of parenting is to educate the kids so that when they leave the nest, they don't come back. And so far, they haven't come back. So
I'm struggling with if you do everything right, they will leave you, right? That is like the big
Yeah.
thing I came to the realization. I'm like, is that something fair, right? And I'm working on it
Yeah,
myself, but I think I might go back to therapy for a couple of sessions just to kind of unpack that a little bit more. Because I'm like, I did
yeah, I mean,
everything right.
yeah. I mean, like, yeah, it does. There is the other side of that. I mean, there are things that happen unexpected that maybe they have to come back to the nest for a little bit. But I think if you give them those underlying skills that help them to develop as a person, to be able to, go out there and function in society in a way
Yeah,
that is productive. But I say that kind of carte blanche, but I also understand that there are times where, maybe that's not the case. Actually, I'm on the verge of that. I have one of my kids that actually might be in that type of situation that we're trying to help him work through, that to help him maintain dignity and stay independent, that he can, continue on his
yeah,
path that he's on. And, he's on a good path. It just, he had external circumstances that came his way
absolutely.
that were beyond his control, that he
Yeah,
didn't, he didn't know and he didn't expect. And, it's those things in life are good to encounter because it does build that resiliency. And
absolutely.
actually it builds, I mean, I like a word that's kind of higher than resiliency. It's called anti-fragile confidence. And that was coined by guy that I know. His name's Brian Johnson. So, but we don't.
Anti-fragile confidence. I like that.
Anti-fragile confidence. So the way it's explained is that you have fragility or fragile on one end. So you kind of think of that line. And then on the other hand, you're going to have anti-fragile, which is the opposite of being fragile. So fragile is like, I break when anything comes my way. I can't handle life. I have to cope. I go drink. I go do drugs. Like that's fragile. Or something comes along and you curl up in a little ball and sit in the corner. The next step up would be resiliency, where something is coming along and you're resilient. And it's like, okay, I'm going to bounce back a little bit. But at some point, there's a breaking point where you just say, okay, I had enough. You have a breakdown, you just, you go out and drink for the weekend or something that just brings you to the point of I can't take it anymore. That would be resilient. So you've got it, but you just get to the point. Anti-fragile confidence, well, anti-fragile or anti-fragility is where you say, okay, I'm walking through this really tough thing. Bring it on. Give me more. It's going to make me better. There's a bunch of little mind hack mantras that I say to myself, like no pressure, no diamonds. I'm not going to be at my best and succeed unless there's some pressure that's going with that. So anti-fragility just takes that problem that's coming your way and say, okay, I'm going to eat this thing like an energy bar, and then I'm just going to keep going. And then when you pair it with confidence is just that inner ability in yourself to know that whatever does come your way, you're going to handle it with anti-fragility, and you've got the tools that you need inside of you to accomplish that goal, or that you're going to find people outside of you in order to help you accomplish that goal as
Mhm.
well. And so on
I love that.
anti-fragility, oh, thank
It's the
you.
confidence, it's a
Yeah.
confident posture and
Mhm.
knowledge that you will be able to
Yeah.
solve the
And
problem
it's
no matter
and
what
it's not
problems are.
cocky. I mean, it's not a
No.
cocky
Oh,
kind of way.
no.
It's just
Confidence.
that, oh, I know I've got this strength within me.
Mhm.
I know I'm facing something that's new or different or challenging for me, but I know that what I need is going to appear, or what I need to do, I'm going to find, or there's just something about it that propels you to just keep going, to know that, okay, this is rough, but we're going to get through this. And it's a nice tie-in because in your book is talks about connections, and you talk about building a village, that you build relationships in a village. So explain what you mean by a village, a concept of a village.
There's, that this whole thing, there's that African proverb that
Yes, that's
says
what I was
it takes
thinking of.
yeah,
Takes a
it takes
village
a
to
village to raise a
raise a
child.
child. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we all know, anybody who has a child, or if you care for a child, you know that nothing is more true than that. And what I did is I looked at that and I extended it a little bit, that it's not just to raise a child that it takes a village. It takes a village to become somebody. It takes a village to be successful. It takes a village to thrive. If you look at populations at risk, and again, we'll think about big brothers, big sisters here, what they do is, if you don't have the support of a village, if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have somebody to support you psychologically as you need to go through these challenges that life throws at you, if you don't have somebody on your corner right? Like it just makes it so much harder because then you can go and spiral into that despair that I can't, life isn't fair, everything is against me, there's nobody for me. So when you have a village, building a village is nothing more than doing this in a more intentional way, in the sense that, well, okay, let's evaluate your relationships. Which one of these relationships are contributing to the best version of you? Right? Is it that friend who's always around, who's a cheerleader, who believes in everything you want to do? Like when I said I'm going to write a book, I had a couple of people and they were clapping. I'm like, no, 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 don't clap. Don't even tell anybody. Because I'm like, I'm just kind of saying it as a secret. I don't know, like, because it's a big endeavor. No, no, no. If anybody can do it, you can do it. And they're clapping. So somebody like that is great to have on your side. And then the people who believe in you, or the people that are better standards for you, when it comes, whether emotionally or as a human being, there's always those souls that are more elevated than us, and they inspire us to be better. So having somebody like that in your village is phenomenal, because you will be better, just because you're like, oh, that's a different standard. I got to kind of, it keeps you in check to keep that standard. And then people that succeed at work, right? People that work hard, so that have these qualities that you want to have. So that's what I mean about a village, making sure you have these people that support and inspire you, that they become a village. And then because of them that you thrive, because of them, you become better. You become a better version of yourself. No man is an island, right? You by yourself, I'll tell you this, like me by myself, that'd be no book. That would be no anything. You're curled up in a ball there doing nothing, right? If there's no support, if there's no people around us, we are built for connection. We are predisposed for relationships and human connection. So having that, but having the connections that will propel you forward, that I think is where the jump is. Like making sure you actually curate your village so it's the best one possible.
So village then is basically your relationship network. When you
Absolutely.
think of the word village, you think of proximity, you think of everybody being close. At least I think about it as being like in a community,
Mhm.
like of houses in one place, but that's really not what it is. That makes complete sense. I love that you said no man is an island. But I want to tease that out for a minute, because when you said that, I think of solopreneurs. You have those entrepreneurs that are just, I'm going to bootstrap life and I'm going at this myself. So, what are your thoughts on solopreneurship and relationships?
Solopreneur are solo only in name. I think that's my big statement. I'm a solopreneur. My import export business, I'm solo. But that does not mean I built it by myself. It means I had the support of, I'll start with my husband, who was the first one to believe in it. I needed to buy products and sell products. Though I had a cash flow problem between having to buy and giving my clients a 60-day time limit to pay me. He's the one who's like, no problem, I'll lend you some money. So he did. My father-in-law, he has a big company in Brazil, and he had an address, he had lawyers, he had accountants, he had everything. He's like, come on in. You can use all these professionals, but you don't need to pay for them. I'm a solopreneur, but look at all these people in my village helping me out. We had this lady who worked at our house, this nanny, she phenomenal. If she hadn't helped me with, taking care of my children and doing so lovingly that I felt comfortable leaving my children with her while I worked, I wouldn't have done it. So it's a solopreneur, but look, just from the top of my head, 3 people. And then all my friends who were clapping, go, yeah, you can do this. This is awesome. How's it going? Did you close a sale? Did you have a contract? What's happening? So it's solo in the sense that you are the only one maybe leading that project. But the village is everybody else, all that support team, your partner, your kids, maybe your family of origin, your friends, other other entrepreneurs that tell you that this is really how it works, mentors. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people.
Thank you for defining that, because I'm in a space and, we hear that term all the time. Oh, solopreneur, solopreneur. I just so appreciated the way you unpacked that it's
Yeah.
really not. Yeah, you can be a solopreneur, but the reality is that you have are, you know, you have a lot of people behind you
Absolutely.
that support you in the other areas. It kind of follows that idea of who, not how. Have you ever heard of the Ben Hardy, Dan Sullivan book called Who,
No.
Not How? So the basic premise of the book is that the who's, you know, you want to accomplish something, you have to go find the who's to go do it if you don't know how to do it. So when you find the who's, the how will follow.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same idea being a solopreneur, and then having all these people around you to support you
Yeah.
and help you with that. I think that's so cool. So, you know, like, and let's talk a little bit more about being a solopreneur. And you know, in a way, you're a leader in what you
Mhm.
do because you have all these other things that you have to make decisions and stuff. Why is maintaining intellectual humility, how's that make you a better leader? And as you answer that, explain what you mean by intellectual humility.
Intellectual humility is it goes back to that of knowing that you don't know everything. So intellectual humility is a posture of being open to learn what you don't know. So it comes from recognizing. So when you tie that with a solopreneur is perfect, because I'm willing to bet, you know how there's a huge statistics that new businesses, there's a big percentage of new businesses that don't make it after first year, five
Yeah, I
years.
think 96%. I have a friend of mine that wrote a book on that called The
Yeah,
4% Breakthrough. He
there
said
you go.
96%, yeah, 96% of the entrepreneurs don't make it. And then he wrote a book on, hey, be the other 4%.
There you
So
go.
yes,
So I'm
there you
willing
go.
to bet. So I'm willing to bet. I won't talk about the 96 because there's many reasons why you
Yes.
fail in business, right? So I don't want to touch on that because that's too big a number, but I can guarantee all in that the 6% that made it have intellectual humility. And what do I mean by that? They are willing to learn from mentors. They're willing to try something that defies their beliefs, right? So, no, this is how I do it. I'm thinking of packaging this box in pink and sending it by ship. And then somebody who's done it differently says, no, 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 package it in purple and send it by plane. And you're like, but that doesn't make sense because plane is so much more expensive. It's not gonna, right? It's gonna be more expensive, and then I don't know how much my profit is gonna be. You can give all the arguments and talk about it and be intellectually humble to hear that no, your profit margin is going to be smaller, but then the volume is going to be bigger. Whatever the argument is, if you're intellectually humble, you can actually have that conversation and entertain the possibility that something totally different from what you were thinking can be right and can be better. And then what happens is you end up not doing what you want. You do something else that was suggested that maybe is absolutely different from what you thought. And hey, that's where success lies, right? In the ability to adapt, adjust, change, do something in a way that was totally different. I don't want to use myself as a success story because that's kind of off taste. But
Go ahead.
I
Because, hey, you know
initially
what? Success leaves clues, you know? So you have clues. So yeah, no, that's
I
fine.
so but my business initially, I was all about selling on commission. So I used to buy and sell juice, but because I didn't want the risk, I was like, no, 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 just, just sell directly and you just pay me a commission. And I was a commissioned agent for the first few years. And my husband, who comes from an entrepreneurial family, and his dad was an entrepreneur, he's an entrepreneur, his brother's an entrepreneur, that's all they do. You're leaving money on the table. Buy and sell. And then the spread is yours. Your ability to negotiate, it becomes all your profit. But I'm like, no, but then the risk, makes no sense. All this risk. Think if the client doesn't pay, then I end up losing all this money. And so that was my model. My model is I want to be an executive. I want to have secure money. I don't want to go into any risk. But I had that humility of going, look, his dad's pretty successful. He's pretty successful. Like these people, it's not like they don't know what they're doing. Maybe I have something to learn from this model. Sure enough, I pivoted. And I'll tell you, it was very scary. It was very uncomfortable to do something I wasn't aligned with because it was almost against my beliefs. I'm like, who takes on that much risk? Because I don't sell a few bottles, I sell container full of juices. That's a lot of investment up front. And I did. And it was the best thing I've done. And that's, the best thing I've done, my whole business is built on a premise that was not mine. But it was because I had the intellectual humility of going, maybe my way is not the best way. Maybe there's a better way out there, and going, maybe what I know is not enough. And that's what allowed me to kind of pivot the whole model of my business and allow it to be more successful.
So, oh, that's a cool story. Thank you for sharing that. I heard you say that you were, like you were scared. There was fear in there. How did you get yourself over that?
It took me a while. It took me a while. And again, the village. Like my partner's just sensational. We've been together. This year is our 30-year story. So we've been together for 30 years. And he is relentless. Like when he knows something is better or there's a better way of doing something or he believes, he's relentless. And he's like, you're leaving money on the table, leaving money on the table. And he's showing me by A plus B here, if you do this, the outcome is going to be better. And he was so certain that his certainty drove me. But I was absolutely afraid. I was absolutely worried. And, we did the math and he's like, if it all goes bad, I'll help you. I'll support you. So there was some of that conversation as well. But yeah, you have to push through the fear sometimes to do something different and big and better.
Yeah, it sounds like he was just giving you his belief and you
Yeah.
were borrowing it for a little bit of time until you
Yeah.
could get over that hump.
Until I
And
believed. Yeah. And
yeah,
that is
yeah.
and that is the when you say that, he was giving you his belief and you borrowed it for a bit. I love the way you said that,
Oh, thanks.
because when we are not there yet, our village is, and we can borrow our village's belief. We can borrow our village's trust. Sometimes our people know better than we do. Remember when we were talking about being emotionally involved in the circumstances? When you're emotionally involved, I had a lot of fear. I couldn't objectively see that the chances of me not being paid were small because I was so afraid. So when you're afraid of taking the challenge or changing businesses or, going in all in into a relationship, moving, changing careers, whatever it is, your village comes in and they can support you in exactly this fashion that you said, which is you can borrow from them the confidence that you don't have yet. And you borrow it for a while for the first few steps. And then 100 meters in, you're like, okay, I got it too. So then you can walk ahead. That's why the importance of this village. That's why the importance of connection. That's why together and connected, we go so much further and so much, we can get so much more successful with it.
What would you say to somebody who feels that they don't have that village around them? Where would they start?
Build it. Build it, build it. One of the chapters in the book, probably in the very beginning, I talk about, all this research that shows, the benefits. So let's take our average, like let's take somebody who's 40. I like 40 because it's kind of close to midlife. You've done some, but there's a lot to be done still. So 40. If you look at a person at 40, they are the consequence of everything that has happened for the last 39 years. The people they have been with, their parents impact who they become, their siblings impact who they become, the trauma they went through in junior high, high school impacts who they become, that first girlfriend or that abusive boyfriend or that auntie who was so cool and crazy and, told them that anything was possible. All these people, all these characters play a role into making this person at 40 be who they are. Right? The thing is, there's another 40, 50 years ahead. So my question is, if all of these people are responsible or impacted who you are today, why not build a village today and make sure the next 40 years, 50 years are the best ones you can have? Why not design your future? Why not design? And of course, I'm being simplistic. I'm fully aware that I'm being simplistic. There are some scars from childhood. If you go through trauma, abuse, all that stuff, you can't just let go of it. However, you can improve the way your future is. So if you have trauma and abuse in your past and you are in an abusive relationship today, Well, that you can change. You can't change the past, whatever happened in the past, but you certainly can change who you're going to be walking with for the next other half of your life, right? So, and what do you do to build this village? You do the work. You go to a coach, you go to a therapist, you sit down, you evaluate. There is I actually have a form that I get people to, write down the 5 closest relationships you have by the amount of time you spent together, and the 5 most impactful relationships that you have. So maybe it's people you don't spend as much time with, but it's people who really have that impact. If they say something, it really stays. That's 10 people. Evaluate those relationships. Are they all helping to propel you forward? If so, focus on them, invest in them, make sure they're better, improve those relationships, invest in them. If some of them are not, what are you going to do? Right? It's not about cutting it off, but it is about protecting yourself a little bit, right? Putting those boundaries, pushing it away, going, you know what? We will still talk. Sometimes family members are not, they can be very hurtful. They can keep you back. So I'm not saying, well, let's all cut them off. But, what about then let's have those conversations about safer topics. Let's not go in depth in places where you might get hurt, right? Control the narrative, control those conversations. And then that way you become an engineer of where you want to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, who you surround yourself with really does matter. And I guess in listening to you answer the question, we may feel like we're on islands, that we feel like we're alone. And I'm sure you've had people come into you and say, "Oh, Patricia, I'm just, I'm at my wit's end. I feel like I'm all alone here. You're the only person I have to talk to you." Do you find in your experience that you walk them through, they really aren't alone, that there are people in their lives, that there are friends that are around, that this feeling of being alone is just a perception. It's not a reality. And then when they sit down and say, okay, well, I do have a village around me, but I just have to assess the health of the village that I have around me, which is kind of what you were talking about, to assess, your 5 closest friends. And
I think there's, so loneliness, and you said, well, it's a perception, it's not a reality. I agree and I disagree with that. I agree because you're right. Let's sit down and pull. Where are these people? Who are you? Everybody has a village, right? So there's something that I agree with you, but I also disagree because we are living a loneliness epidemic. The U.S. Health General or surgeon, I don't know what the position is, Vivek Murthy, he just released a book, I think it was last year, that talks about the age of loneliness, like this epidemic we're all living. We are all isolated and lonely. And of course, we were going on this path, and, COVID didn't help. If anything, it accentuated it. So when you add the fact that we are all isolated with this social media kind of, where entertainment is all in our house. We don't need to go to the movies anymore. It's all here. On top of that, you add COVID. And then I'm going to go into the cultural aspect, which is we might respect each other too much. And I'm talking here about North American culture. Canada and the US, I observe this a lot, which is my neighbors don't come over. My neighbors don't call. They don't invite me over. It's Tuesday. Just swing by after dinner, just, catch up for an hour or two. We don't do these things because, well, they might be busy. I'm not going to pester them. I'm not going to, I'm going to leave them alone. They probably need their alone time. And meanwhile, here we are in the street. Everybody is alone in their own houses, needing connection, needing to be seen, to be heard, to share. So this is why connection comes in at such a favorable time, because we do need it to solve a lot of our problems, because we're not reaching out. And when you say that we all have this village, absolutely. Let's sit down, do the work, pull out who are these people. But don't think you are entitled to good relationships. You're not entitled to good teams at work. You're not entitled to this great village that, I was born, therefore, where's my village? You're not entitled to any of that. It all requires you to do the work. It's not going to fall from the sky. Oh, I'm so alone. Nobody called me. I'm like, who did you call? Oh, I have no plans Friday night. Who did you call? Right? Because you are the only variable you can control. So do you want to go out every Friday, Saturday, Sunday? You pick up that phone. That thing actually makes phone calls. It's surprising, I know. It makes phone calls. Don't text people. Call people. Hey, Sue, how's it going? What are you up to this weekend? Oh, not much. Do you want to go for dinner? I can guarantee if you're not going for dinner with me on Friday, you'll come for Saturday. If not, then we'll go for coffee on Sunday. You can get these people. And I'll tell you another thing, people love it because it's going to be a breath of fresh air. Everybody wants to be connected. It's almost like we lost our ability to, or we are too afraid to reach out. Or I don't know what it is.
I would agree with you. I think social media provides that instant hit, that instant gratification that we're looking for. You can get that instant dopamine hit by
Yeah.
going through Facebook. But it's very interesting we were saying about picking up the phone and calling somebody. So I'm 52. So I'll go back like I would say 20 years. All right. So I'll go back 20 years. You didn't have cell phone. I guess Facebook was around. I don't know. I wasn't on
Yeah.
it. But my connections, my relationships were phone based. I remember getting on the phone and a girlfriend and I would talk for an hour.
No.
You know, the kids were playing in the background. Some of my kids were occupied. Her kids were occupied in her house somewhere. But you picked up the phone and you had that relational conversation and you felt connected to that person. You might be able to feel connected to a person in a text message, but the problem that I found with text messaging is you don't hear the tone of voice.
No.
You can't really tell, what's going on their end. Is something, are they in the middle of something really important, or are they just sitting on their back porch with a glass of wine? Are you interrupting them? And everybody doesn't want to, they don't want to bother anybody anymore. And it just contributes to this feeling of loneliness
Yeah.
and feeling of being isolated. Do you have a differentiation between loneliness and isolation, the way you would define it?
I didn't think of that. That's a hard question. Loneliness and isolation. Can you be isolated without being lonely? And can you be lonely without being isolated? I guess you can be lonely without being isolated because I'll tackle that one because you can be lonely surrounded by people if you don't have connection. If you don't have connection, not having connection. So, here you are you're at a party. Everybody's at the party. Everybody's having a great time. You're not isolated. You're here with like 50 people. But if you're not connected to anybody, or if, you're not really having conversations if you're not seen or being seen, you can absolutely be lonely surrounded by people. That is for sure. Loneliness does not entail being alone. Loneliness is a feeling that has to do with a lack of connection. And so for loneliness, the remedy is not to surround yourself with people, but actually to connect with at least another human being, right? The solution for loneliness is not a number. It's not a number. It's not about surrounding yourself. It's about a connection. It's about a behavior. It's about something more transcendent, I think.
Okay. So then would you say that isolation would be somebody who is just totally all by themselves? And then a byproduct of that would be loneliness because you are isolated and you don't have people around you? Or can you feel isolated but still have connection?
I think I like the first thing you said, which is you can be isolated, and as a consequence, you feel lonely. I don't know if you can be isolated and have connection. Of course you can. Okay, I'm isolated, but then I'm still FaceTiming you and we're still connecting. I think you can, but if you're isolated long enough, so isolation is not good for long periods of time. But can you be isolated and still be connected? Absolutely. So let's say you go off, I don't know, I live in Canada, so sometimes you have projects way up in the north where it's cold and it's more isolated. But if you're there for 6 months doing this big project and you're not really seeing any of your friends, you can you can remain connected to them even though you're totally isolated. So that is a possibility. Now, if you stay there for the rest of your life, I think naturally these connections begin to fade and then you end up lonely as well. So I think that between the two of us, I think we did well between isolation and loneliness.
It sounds like, isn't that like a variation of island fever? I've heard where, if you live on an island, very isolated, where you're 6 hours from the nearest, civilization. After a while, you feel pretty isolated. Even if you have people around, you may not be lonely, but you're definitely isolated because you,
Yes.
you only can operate in the confines of this small little environment that you're
Yeah.
in. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think
very.
yeah. So isolation, I think, is more structural. It's more physical.
Mhm,
It's, isolation is, are you away from me? Whereas
mhm,
connection is more intangible.
mm,
Connection is a feeling, is something, it's a construct, it's something we build.
mhm, mhm. So let's talk about happiness. What's your idea on? Actually, you have a quote about why you need to find your purpose and not focus on your happiness. Because everybody I hear nowadays, it's like, oh, like just be happy. You'll be fine. Just be happy. Find somebody who's, on your side. And I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I want a psychotherapist perspective on happiness.
Happiness, I think happiness is hard to seek it because it's so fickle. It's so ephemeral, right? You're happy here a moment and then you're sad the next, right? So you can be really happy because your kid comes in and gives you a hug. So that makes you happy. You're happy because you got a great grade on your exam. You're happy because that boy called you. You're happy because you got a raise. You're happy. But then the minute you get to your car and you have a flat tire, then you're sad. So it's just that oscillates too much. You can't hang on to that happiness. So striving for the happiness becomes problematic because you are after that dopamine hit after hit after hit. You're searching for something that you can't even hold on to. Whereas purpose and meaning and it's just so much bigger. And I think that's why it became the word du jour, right? Like look for your purpose. What's your purpose in life? It has become cliche and it's really too bad. But if you can sign up for a bigger project, as in, okay, what is my destination? What is my North Star? What is it that I want for myself? Because then you have guidance, and then the path will have ups and downs, and even the downs will be ways to get towards that North Star. I'm gonna maybe use an example here, and I'll use an example of mine because I it is something that I kind of continuously remind me of. There's an exercise that I do with my clients, so of course I did it with myself first, which is what would you like your tombstone to say? Right? So that's a big one. Like, what would you like to have accomplished? So mine says two things. I actually have it on a post-it, so I don't forget because it needs to be very important to like it needs to be top in front of my mind. Like, right, my goal needs to be clear, and I have to see it every day. So my tombstone, there's two things it's going to say. One, it's going to say purposely tried to be better every day. Okay, and the second thing it says had a great life, knew it, and was very grateful for it. So these are two very strong pillars for me is wanting to be a better human every day and being grateful for all I have every day. These are my two big pillars. Now let's use the example I was giving you. So I'm here working. One of my children comes and gives me a big hug and, just one of those fabulous hugs that gets all the feelings. And it's like, oh, gratitude. Thank you, world, universe, for having love in my life, for being able to feel this. Because what I feel with these two is I cannot explain to you. It's the most important and defining feeling for me, what I feel for my kids. So thank you for being able to live and experience this. This is grace, right? So excellent. Then I go finish this. The hug is all good. Happy, happy, joy, joy. And then I'm going to go to my car. Flat tire. Okay, now it's about me going, how am I going to be a better human every day? Am I going to freak out about this? Right? So it's like, dang it, I'm going to be late for my next appointment. It's going to be a problem. So that's when you go and decide that, okay, what does a good person do about this? What does a better person do about this? Right? Am I going to freak out, yell at my kids that maybe one of my kids took my car and that flat tires because they drove over it? I don't know. No, I'm going to try to get organized, not dysregulate. That's what a good human would be. And then all of a sudden you see how this oscillation, it's not as important because everything kind of has meaning towards this. What is my what's my big umbrella that I live under, which is gratitude and trying to be better every day. So I hope that kind
Yeah,
of
no, that's great. No, it sounds like we would call it the funeral exercise. It
yes,
sounds like that funeral exercise helps people find that North Star. Like, what do
yeah.
you want to be remembered as when you're gone? If someone's struggling with that, are there any other tools any other small steps that you would suggest to help somebody find their purpose in life?
I love your small steps because it is all about the small steps. There's nothing grandiose. On my chapter 2, it is about, if you don't know what your purpose is, we'll help you find it. So, and it's, I think I have a quote that is almost identical to your small steps ideas, which is, it doesn't have to be grandiose, right? Like my purpose is not going to be Bill Gates's purpose. I watched Inside Bill Gates's Head, that Netflix. It has 3 episodes. You watch that, that's disencouraging for anybody. The man wants to, there's 3 big problems in the world he decided he's going to solve, but the reach he has, the money he has, the influence he has, of course you can't have a purpose compared to that. You're just setting yourself up for failure. It is about the small steps. It's about, what is it that you like to do, right? We talk about the ikigai, which is, what is it that you're good at? What is it that you love doing? What is it that the world needs? And what is it that you can be paid for? Find the intersection, then maybe that can be, whether it's your purpose, whether it's your job, or take away the pain part, that could be your purpose. Finding, and that might be being, you don't have to be in the workplace. You can be the best parent your children can have. You are helping form the building blocks of tomorrow's society. Right. And I think there isn't a stronger and most important work than that of forming these little humans that are going to be running our country in the future. Right. So that can be your purpose. Whatever it is that you choose to do, doing it intentionally, doing it knowing that this makes sense, so that, or whatever speaks to you or to your biography or to your life, go there. But it does. It requires you to sit down and think. It's not just going to pop in.
Yeah, yeah, that quiet time. What I really appreciate about what you said is that it doesn't have to be grandiose. It
No,
doesn't have to be
no.
huge. Your purpose just has to be something that sets in your soul and is satisfying to you. Do you find like when we talked about happiness before, like happiness swings, you could be happy 1 minute and not the next. Do you find that when you find your purpose and you really know you're operating out of that, this is authentically me. This is what really feels, what life feels like for me. That happiness is something you no longer have to chase. It's not contingent upon how you view life.
It's almost like if you have happiness as a goal, I think that's when you're not setting yourself up for success. But I think happy is also a mindset that is easy to achieve. So the choose happy, that is easier to achieve if you're on the path. Because if you're on the path, then being happy becomes a choice. Right? I tell my kids this all the time. There's a mantra, and it's a mantra in my house, which is happiness lives inside our heart, which is another way to say happiness is a choice, right? Because if happiness is a choice and happiness is inside your heart, as long as you're on the path, it's like, okay, flat tire. All right, I'm going to choose happy. I'm not going to freak out about this. I'm going to Uber, whatever it is. I'm going to deal with this later, right? I'm going to be grateful that I actually can deal with this. I'm going to be grateful that Ubers exist. I can get an Uber. Like there are solutions for my conundrum. You know what doesn't have solutions? Big problems don't. Right? Like being fired from your work. Yeah. Is it bigger than a flat tire? Yes. Is it the end of the world? No. Being happy, choosing happy is, what else is this showing me? What other opportunities can I see from these things that are, quotation marks, sad or unpleasant or not cool. Of course, there's things that are, objectively sad, right? If something happens to your child, or if there's a death in the family, of course, there's some things I'm not going to, try to see the happiness and lost a child. Well, happy, happy. There's no happy there. There are things that are objectively not happy, but 90% or 95% of the things, it is about how are you going to look at this and what are you going to choose?
Yeah, it's not about being in denial. It's about the choice in your reaction. And there's
Yeah.
nothing, like you said, if somebody loses a child, I mean, obviously that's devastating, very
Yeah.
traumatic. And there's a time and place to sit
Yeah.
in that trauma
Yeah.
and work it out and
Yeah.
work it through. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't want anybody to think that we're just sugarcoating
No. Toxic
life.
positivity. No, no, no,
Yeah,
no.
no,
That's
yeah,
not for
yeah.
me
I
at
like
all.
that toxic positivity. Yeah, yeah,
None of that.
yeah. No, no, no. We don't want that. But but that you can get to that point where things are, it's like, hey, life is like right now we're having a podcast. Pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
It's a good. There's nothing else going on other than just us, us chatting about that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I feel like we could just keep talking
Oh, for
forever and
sure. For
ever
sure.
and ever. So well, that's what other podcasts are for too. So, as we're getting close to wrapping up, I know your book is coming out. Your book will be out by the time this podcast comes out. So, anything else you want to add about your book coming out that will be
I
out?
really hope, and again, it's a purpose piece for me. I really, really hope people benefit from reading it. I'm going to shamelessly plug it because, again, I make nothing out of it. So I'm plugging it because I think you can benefit from it. And I really hope you do, with these small steps that you can do to improve your connections, improve your relationships. And then as a byproduct, you'll have more success and more happiness. And even if you don't like it, then whatever you invested in it goes and supports Big Brothers Big Sisters, which is an initiative that invests in relationships and also makes the world a better place. So it's a win-win. We can't go wrong with it. So if you could please go buy the book. It's available at Amazon. It's Patricia Bathory, Connected. The name of the book is Connected: Building Relationships to Achieve Success and Make a Lasting Impact. You can buy it there. And if you like it, please rate it too, because that's very important. The ratings are very important just to drive sales and so that we can make more of an impact, selling more books and contributing more to Big Brothers Big Sisters. If you don't like it, you don't need to leave a review. Please and thank you. But yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, while we're talking about books, what is one book or resource that has had a significant impact on you?
I was thinking that you might ask that question, and I was worried because I'm like, oh man, my books are so nerdy. Um, I I have two big crushes in the literary world. One is my fellow Canadian Malcolm Gladwell. I love the way he writes. I love the way he explains his rationale, and he is one of the examples that of somebody who writes stuff that sometimes I don't even agree with, but his rationale is so well written that I really enjoy the ride he takes me on, and he explains it so well that it's fascinating. So Malcolm Gladwell will be one. And the second one is Irvin Yalom. He is the father of existential psychotherapist. He is a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst who lives in Palo Alto. He's 93 years old. My claim to fame is I actually texted him, I emailed him to blurb my book, and he answered. He said,
Wow.
no, I
Congrats.
can't. I'm too old. I'm going through some health issues.
Wow.
But he answered, and I'm like, oh my God, my all time, the person I really admire the most in psychology, psychiatrist, he answered my email. So he's a phenomenal man. So anything by those two, I would say really impacted me because I have read their books once, twice, a few times, and every time I read, I get something new out of it. They're great people.
Oh, that's awesome. The next question, I love this one. What is one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
I don't know. I think we were pretty thorough about relationships, about their importance. I don't know. I think we ended up talking. We talked about relationships and connection, and I think we did a really good job of going really deep into that topic. So of course there's more topics that in psychology we could approach, but I think we did a really good job of unpacking this whole idea of connection, relationships, loneliness, isolation. So no, I think it was fabulous.
Okay, perfect. Well, as we close, and I ask all of my guests this wonderful question, as we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Invest in relationships, but I'll be more specific because you want one step. So I'll be very specific about this. Pick one person in your life, whether it's your partner, whether it's a child that you're having difficulty with, whether it is somebody from your family of origin, a sibling, a parent, a friend, a mentor. Choose just one person and commit right now to improve that relationship, to improve that relationship, make it closer, connect more often. Start by picking up that phone, calling them. Send a text first because this is what society has come down to. Can I call you later on today? Can I call you right now? Are you available? And give them a call. Just out of nowhere. They're going to think it's so weird because nobody does that anymore. But start that today. Start having the habit of calling people. So if you look at my calendar, there's aunts I call regularly, like every 2 weeks. There's this aunt that I call every 2 weeks. I make sure I call my parents every once in a while. I call sibling every once in a while. There's these faraway friends that I need to call every once in a while. And it's not a need to, as in it's a chore, but I know it's good for me. It's like taking vitamins. Like calling them is the best thing I do for myself. So that's the small step. Very actionable.
I love it. I love it. How can people find you?
www.patriciabathory.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Patricia Bathory. I'm on Instagram. I think it's Patty Bathory, P-A-T-I Bathory. I'm also on Facebook. I think it's Patricia Bathory there. Just my name everywhere. But thank you.
That's great. Yeah. And I'll put them all in the show notes as we
Perfect.
always do. Patricia, this has been a fantastic conversation. I have enjoyed myself immensely. Thank you for the gift of your time.
Thank you for the honor of being here and guesting in your show. Thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.